All right, here we go, kids. There were so many. I do want to do this live stream because I feel like it's gonna be fruitful, generative, good, um, true, beautiful, but also because sometimes I made this comment, post, whatever on X, and I'm not that active there. I'd like to be less active. It's like it started to pull me in a little bit, and um, I just don't. I'm not good with. We'll get into this. I'm not good with boundaries. I'm not good with self control, or I'm not as good as I would like to be. And um, and the temptation, the allure of being able to talk to thoughtful people about things that I'm constantly ruminating on myself is a big temptation, and then to see what people think. So, but anyhow, I was on there, and then this comment this post got more uh, attention than um, than I'm used to. And so let's start there. I'll look at some comments. I'm going to talk about some things. I've been thinking about it, and there's a very large mosaic vision of which, for those who are new or uninitiated in my channel, mosaic vision is one of my it's one of my little I don't know what you call it, Lukeisms, phrases that I've made up to try to articulate what I'm talking about. And Nick, our boy Nick Free Rillian, the other day was giving he was that guy's great. He's great because he disagrees with me all the time, and I like it. But he disagrees with me, but I know he's always for me. So that's the thing, which is related to what we're going to talk about, disagreeing and disagreeing well, and what's really going on and all that. But he was saying, I don't know why people use new words for things when there's a perfectly good old word to do it. And so mosaic vision is one of those. It's not a new word. It's like a compound of a couple ideas that illustrate for me like a very important thing. I mean, I could really illustrate why mosaic vision is related to phenomenology and how we actually perceive things, both with our vision, both with our eyesight, but more broadly with our vision, which is also intellectual vision, intellectual sight. And mosaic vision and I think this is why philosophically mosaics are such a profound concept, and why I like really old iconography that is done in mosaics, because it's unity and multiplicity. It's a bunch of pieces and a bunch of parts that make a unitive whole. It's where the many become one. And you can't really, and this gets to like center and periphery and boundedness, and like what makes something whole. Because if you hyper focus on something, left brain, right brain too, because if you hyper focus on something, you won't see the whole picture. But this is how I think. I think in mosaic terms. And so usually there's a very large, as Lance Cleaver, our boy Lance, who's busy and not here that much, has often said, being an ENFP, whatever. I don't even know that I'm an ENFP, maybe INFP. But it's very 30,000 foot view, very forest versus trees. And so when you're looking at something with a mosaic vision, I actually think it's equivalent to what Peugeot is talking about. It's levels of fractals. It's also Russian nesting dolls, but it's also like the cup, right? When he says the cup, it's made of parts, right? Handle, cup, this part, but like when you perceive all those things as one, that is what it means to see. And so like a cup is a mosaic. This is what I would argue. Everything is a mosaic. But are you saying that you think that I'm an ENFP? I don't know. I think the older I get, and part of this is like as you get older, you become less extroverted, apparently, I've heard. But also like going to these conferences like Midwestry, I realize I really like people, but um, big group, I don't know. It's too, like I said this before, I want to be with everyone and love everyone and meet and talk to everyone. Like even I was thinking about this with damn, I'm gonna forget your name. Mike Myers. Is it Mike Myers? No, it's not Mike Myers. What is your name? What's your first name? MM. You know what I'm talking about. You and your wife, which I also forgot her name. What's your channel? Your channel's like with the cow. Someone help me out. You're here. Anyhow. But like I was talking to him. He's this guy who's in the channel more, brought his wife. I really want to spend a lot of time with your wife because I want to make her feel cared for and loved and known and seen and not just be like spouse of the guy coming. And you can't do it. Believe it or not, you can't be everywhere all at once. You know, that's part of attention. It's part of the limitedness of embodiedness. Anyhow, back to mosaics. With this, there's a lot of things going on in my mosaic vision, which is cluttered and disorganized, and I don't know how to bring it all in for this, so I'm gonna do my best. Look at this. I'm already 6 minutes in. I haven't even began. Okay. Well, listen, that's good. I'm not saying I want to spend time with her alone, Yanni. Good grief. Not like a what's the term? I'm not like a what's it called when you break up a marriage? I'm not into it. An adulterer? I think there's also another term I'm looking for, but I can't think of it. Okay, let's go here. All right, here we go. You can't be friends with people with whom you disagree. Is this working? And I mean actually disagree. So when I say actually, I'm saying in reality, in being, not in theory, not in principle, not in abstract, in actuality, in your lived embodied thing, right? Part of that, and I put this in the description, is belief. Peterson, belief is act as if, right? What do I believe? See what I do, you know? New Testament, if you say, I care about the poor, and you say, go, be well and well fed, and you don't give them food or a coat, do you really care about the poor, you know? True love is this, true faith is this, taking care of orphans and widows, that sort of thing. Like, if you actually do what you say you believe, then it's true belief. It's not mere profession. It's not merely just saying that you believe things. It's doing it. It's the parable. I often use this with my kids. It's the parable of the sons in the vineyard, right? Speaking of that, pause. I gotta pause. I gotta say something. You got it. Home wrecker. That's what I was thinking of. You got it. You win a figurative. No, figurative. You win a not actual gold star. You win a nominalist, abstract gold star. You win my thoughts and prayers. So what was I talking about right before? Oh yeah, actuality, right? It lived, embodied, Rilke. The point is to live everything. So like, the parable of the sons in the vineyard. So there were two sons in a vineyard, right? That were working in a vineyard. The father asked them both to go out. The one said, yeah, I'll go out, and never went out. And then the other son said, no, I won't go out, but ended up going out. And Jesus says, which one do you think was praiseworthy? Which one was good? So the actual doing it is the best thing. Actually being a good person. And this is part of what I want to talk about because, right, belief, the fullness of belief is actually doing it in actuality, in reality, embodied. This is part of the radical implications of the incarnation, right? This is why we're not just like, for all of its, and I don't know, this maybe isn't even true, but Neoplatonism, this is like Hellenism, Judaism. There's a Hellenistic tendency. There's like a Greek abstract thinking philosophical tendency to live in the realm of the disembodied. This is part of why Gnosticism happened, right? Although I'm no expert in Gnosticism, versus like actually living it. You want to live in this ethereal, platonic, perfect, ideal realm, but like it's not real. Like the point is to live everything. And so back to the thing. So if you have an actual disagreement, like a true disagreement, meaning an embodied disagreement about meaningful and substantive things, incarnated things. So if you agree in actuality, it's divorce. And I misspelled it. Look at this. Divorce. So like when in a marriage, when a husband and wife have the fullness of disagreement, they can't live together. They separate or divorce. Yes, don't be a disagreeable asshole. That's correct. Now let's go through some of these comments because there's a number of things I want to illustrate in it. Matt C said he would maybe come in here and talk about it because I was talking to him about it offline a little bit yesterday. So let's go through some of this stuff. Actually, pause. I got to talk to my son for a second. Never mind. He has headphones in. He's not listening to me. Okay. Let's go through this. Oh, look at our own sweet. Oh, good grief. Our own sweet T-Grog. Here do we have talking about child rape. So T-Grog says, I guess we can't be friends. That's the difference between whatever. I don't know. He sent some quote, and I said, "You're here participating, so we can." That's tacit agreement, and that's one of the things I want to bring in is Michael Polayni, and he talks about the tacit dimension. You could talk about here. So here's a couple pieces I want to bring in. Polayni always, because Polayni is awesome, and it's so the tacit dimension is part of it is like your embodied belief becomes tacit. It's unconscious because Polayni, one of the big things he talks about is subsidiary focal integration. So like you focus on something, which is your attention, the center of your attention, center and periphery. And so you focus on something to the point, and then you ritualize it, and you proceduralize it, and you get it down to a point. No, you ritualize it more so than you proceduralize it. That probably comes after. You ritualize it, and you get it down to the point where it becomes habituated. And then once it's habituated, it's unconscious. You no longer have to focus on it anymore, and it's just part of what you do. I often will use like riding a bike or breathing is a big one. Breathing you just do naturally. But sometimes you have to deconstruct your habits of breathing so that then you can analyze them and see what's going on with them and then learn how to breathe better. This is like Wim Hof stuff. But my point here is like in actuality, this is all the critics, right, of TLC, T-Grog, other people who want to criticize what we're doing here, who want to have disagreements and stuff. What's up? What's up? It's a good thing I stopped to talk to that kid. My wife just got him this little. It was so funny. I can share this without being too revealing. Actually, pause. See ya. Bye. So he's very much like me. This poor guy. In many ways, you know, to be blessed is to be cursed as well. And he's a forgetful little guy. He's a big guy. He's taller than me now. And he, our neighbor, like found his check from his job in our alley and brought it into the house. It's just, as my wife always says, it's like me, like, 'cause I lose things all the time. And she's just like, they always come back to you. You're just like the luckiest person in the world. And this came back to him. So she got him this little necklace that has St. Anthony on it, who's in the Catholic tradition. Sorry, this is metagelical, but my wife, whatever, she doesn't know these things. And she's like, is this okay? The cat, and I'm like, well, it's a Catholic saint, but you know, whatever. It's all right. But he's the patron saint of lost things, right? Which whatever. That's a good, thoughtful gift. Anyhow, the poor dude. He's about to leave, go to school. Didn't have his jersey, you know, needed his jersey. Okay. All right, let's get back to this. So we're talking about Polayni, subsidiary focal integration. Let's get rape off the screen. Good Lord. And so there's a lot. Most of what you know, isn't conscious. It can't be, because that's what your prefrontal cortex focuses on. The whole point of it is to put your attention on things that you need to integrate. Potential. And I think I put this in a comment. Maybe it's not in the description, but it's a comment somewhere. So one of the antinomies, right, is potency and actuality, becoming and being. So like you put your attention on what you want to become, right? It's this, you set this thing on the future. Jordan Peterson has a great video on free will that I think is very much related to this. Freedom is oriented toward the future. And we don't really know, I don't know. It's hard to know about the past, but like you're most free from things that are furthest from you in your attention. And so you focus on those things. And as you approach that in time, your freedom diminishes because you're embodying all sorts of things in the way until you come to the moment of choice of action. And then this is a big separate topic that I don't know, I need to figure out by ruminating on it forever in like a Machu Picchu way, how he's thinking about women and Satan and the garden and all these things. But like choice and gnomic will and natural will and Maximus. And I was asking Nate about it, but this is like a place where Nate disagrees with Maximus. So I don't know about that. Like in the moment, I'm inclined to say in the moment, you no longer have libertarian freedom, which is the ability to do otherwise, because you are too constrained. You are too bounded by previous choices, by history, by circumstances. The constraints have limited down to like, boom, the point of act, which is in like when you act. And part of this is related to Rupert Sheldrake and what is that study that he talks about in his book, The Science Delusion or Science Set Free? Because they've done scientific studies on this. Leibniz, I think it's Leibniz studies on choice and action, and that actually your mind and your focal awareness, your prefrontal cortex, your egoic mind, that your thoughts at all, they come after your actions. You just you very quickly, like I don't know what it is, nanoseconds, picoseconds, you actually retroactively, like when you think you're making a choice, the choice is already made. You've already done it. But it happens so fast, like neurologically, the choices you're acting before you move your hand. You've already made the decision to move your hand. You just you don't realize it. Okay, I'm doing multiple things with my children here. Okay. All right, so that's Polayni, subsidiary focal integration. Let's keep going. I mean, I'm going to bring up other things as I keep talking. Let's keep going. So Nick says you can be friends with those you disagree. Part of why I like, this is what I do too. Part of what I like about this comment, and I think so many people liking it, is because they think I was saying the opposite of what I was saying, which often happens. Because usually I'm kind of doing that, or I'm saying things in paradoxical ways. Is that a thread that I dropped with Nick and saying like you should just, oh, it was. When Nick was just saying, just use the old words to say the thing. But the problem is the old words are dead, like Jordan Peterson has talked about. Words lose their potency because they become familiar. And like George MacDonald says, like with most things, is no man understands anything. You just think you understand them because you're familiar with them and you have unavoidable relations with them. And so your unavoidable relations with familiar things you conflate with understanding, but it's not understanding. And the fact is no man understands anything. When he understands that, that is his first tottering step, not towards understanding, but towards the capacity of one day understanding. Great George MacDonald quote from Lilith. And so like this is the problem with words and definitional understanding and thinking that words work in kind of a mammon transactional one-to-one conveyance way, because words don't work that way, because you could have infinite words and it won't tell you anything about meaning. What do the words mean? That's what we have in this. Gavin gets it. Lightsaber noise. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by the word friend, right? What is a friend? Exactly. What is a friend? Is a friend someone who agrees with you on everything? Now I'm talking about agreement in the intellectual potential way, Because my point with my comment is that actual agreement, embodied agreement, is to be unified. Otherwise, it's divorce. If you have, and we'll get into that because there are some illustrations in here where it'll illustrate like what I think what it means with actual disagreement, right? So this involves setting humanity above their opinion. But this is kind of my point, right? If you set the humanity above their opinion, if two people who disagree in their opinions agree to set humanity above that in the hierarchy, guess what? Then they can be friends. But what are they doing? They're agreeing that their humanity, and what does Nick mean by humanity, is more important than the opinion. So they actually have to agree about the humanity thing, which is like the religio, the thing that binds above the credo, which is the opinion, in order to actually be friends. Because if they disagreed about the humanity piece, they wouldn't be friends, right? If they didn't put their humanity above the opinion, then they would separate. They would schism. They would disagree, right? Ooh, I'm going to have a Freud quote about narcissism because I heard it recently. And I agree, Rigel. A friend will feast, play, and die with you. Friends, Gavin, according to Grim Grizz, it's the fraternal regiment embodying narcissistic sociopathy. There's an option. Okay, onward. Let's keep going. And so I said to Nick, right? Because he said, if they change, then they are still the same flesh and spirit. Remember that you would think the same thing if you were them, and you are both certain that you're correct. Yes, but that's grace. So that is an act as if way to say, like, this is what my friend Cal has said many times, which has really helped me with non-judgment and forgiveness and realizing that, like, be careful who judge, for in your judgment you condemn yourself, and with the measure you used, it will be measured to you. So if you judge someone else, to truly judge them, not to just have an opinion about a choice that they've made, but to judge them, which is like, this is the difference between judgment and discernment, having difference of opinion. But if you absolutize your opinion, then it becomes a judgment. And what you're saying essentially is, if I had all the exact constraints that this other person has, if I was them, if I had all the same limitations in my life, I would have done otherwise. So then you're saying with libertarian freedom, essentially, like, if I were you in that situation, I would have chose otherwise. And to me, that's some degree of the gnomic will, right? Where it's saying, like, the gnomic will is the decisive, and I don't know, this is what I don't understand about the gnomic will, and I'm still working on this. I mean, I have no idea. I feel like trying to understand the gnomic will and the natural will and how that relates to true belief and being and choice and salvation, because this is tied with, like, you can't will your salvation. Can you will your damnation, right? Because we say, like, nobody merits their salvation. But yet, so, like, choosing based in your own will, I don't know how that's differentiated from ego. So that's judgment, right? Like, if I were you, I would have done otherwise. But Nick is saying, and I would agree with this, at least right now, in the way that I understand this, that if I was you, you would think the same thing. And so what Nick's just saying essentially is humility, right? He's saying, like, you need to have humility, which is what someone else says later, right? And so I said what I already said. And Nick says, I think there's something that I'm missing. I can't square your original post with this response and not see opposing conditions. All right, let's keep going. Gray, here we go. It's worthy of a stream. And this is Matt when he comes in, because Matt and I were having lots of conversation off stream, and he will probably come in and be able to, and this is the whole Elizabeth Oldfield thing. He'll be able to come and talk about it in ways that I can't talk about it, so that'll be good. Because this came up at Midwestray, right? Elizabeth Oldfield, Rod Dreher, immigration, really disagreeing or not. But, like, what's important about that? Because they disagree about immigration to some degree, or they're working through it and trying to understand, how do I do that, right? How do we love the outsider? Because this is the thing. If you abstract it, this is the problem with, like, thinking about things in abstractions and absolutizing them, is like, you want to look at your systematic way that you would run the country in theory, and then disagree with someone but hopefully not to the point of divorce and schism, right? That's what I'm advocating against. You want to be able to keep talking to people through disagreements for each of your own mutual edification. This is like the wounds of a friend, iron sharpening iron. Like if you take one thing of iron away because the iron is like different, then you can't sharpen anything, you know? Perhaps it's the sound of one iron sharpening. So I think, and again, I think Oldfield and Dreyer were being friends even in their disagreement because they were setting the humanity, like Nick was saying, above their disagreement and talking about it. Now, when at what point can you not do that anymore, right? We're going to get into that. This is Nick being spicy, saying communes have walls, class-based walls. And then I'm making a joke with poor people being gross. Don't hate me on it. Dan was saying George McDonald would disagree with this. I would love to have him expand on that. He hasn't yet. And then friend, I like to bring in some Rollins. What is a friend? I'm working through this faster so we can get people in here. Someone who shares your suffering and lack, because that's Rollins, right? This is a big thing that I keep trying to bring people in on Peter Rollins and saying, like, Peter Rollins would say that communion is people gathered around a common lack. And also I want to bring in this because this is my understanding of what this is my kind of philosophical understanding of what a human being is and what a person is. It's just a way of illustrating it, right? It's an image. Except this one's better, I think. Here we go. Let's get it bigger. Where we're at. Let's do this one. Here we go. All right. I'm going to share a different screen for a while, and then we'll come back, stop, share a different one. Hello. All of a sudden I got big. So Taurus, right? Toroidal. There's someone on X that I want to have this bigger conversation about Tauruses about, because this P. Rollins, right? He says communion is people that are gathered around a common lack, and he'll often use AA as an illustration of this. Alcoholics and Alcoholics Anonymous are people who come together and say, like, we're powerless. We can't fix this. They're gathered around a common lack, a common inability to do something. Like, we don't understand this. We don't know what it is. We give up. We give up we give up ourselves to a power that's greater than us, that we can't understand, a God of our own understanding to help us in this because we can't do it. We can't fix it. I don't know what you mean as a digestive system. I don't think that's anus. I mean, probably everything is like this. Maybe it's an intestine. You know, this is your. Why I'm thinking of Fight Club. This is your. What is he saying that? What's one of those lines from Fight Club? This is whoever's whatever. So like the Taurus, though, I think this is, in a sense, it's kind of an image of everything, right? Because it is. In 2-dimension, a torus isn't 2-dimension, but in 2-dimension, it could be a circle, an Ouroboros, and it circles everywhere. It circles horizontally, it circles this way, it circles that way. You could also take every one of these little points in here as its own torus. So it's toruses on toruses, Russian nesting dolls. But at the center of the torus, of the donut hole, is a lack. You could also do this. This is the cosmos. This is the universe. At the center here is the singularity. Maybe at the center here is the very centerpiece of the black hole from which all fecundity grows. And someone shared something with me recently about how maybe the darkness has light in it. Like even the dark is not dark to you. We just don't yet, again, have the humility in our science to understand what's really going on there. I also think of Interstellar, right? Matthew McConaughey going in sacrificially, going into the black hole, into the what do they call it? The tesseract, right? In the middle, whatever. There's a lot of but like the Taurus, this is how I conceive of a human being. We have an ineffable essence, a core of being. From a Christian perspective, I would call it a logi, because in him we live and move and have our being. The logi is the origin of your being that is constantly outflowing and fractally replicative everywhere, but the center of it is infinitely ineffable, but also infinitely generative, giving birth to everything that is. Exactly. Donut. And so, but like this is what allows, this is essentially, it's also an image of an icon, because you can see it. There's all these appearances of it, but what is it and what is at the core of it? It's something that's beyond naming in an all-encompassing way. Because like what is it that you've studied, or whom is it that you have studied that you've realized there is no depth? Everything. And this is part of the problem of disagreements, right? This is part of what I get into with confessionalism and industrial or institutional religion. PBK brought that up in his homeroom this morning, and I made a comment in PBK because I said, what's the difference between industrial religion and institutional religion? And PBK said, I don't know. I'm going to have to keep working on it and thinking about it for a long time. Because to me, there is no difference. I don't know how you can have, like, how do you have industrial religion before the Industrial Revolution and the Gutenberg Galaxy, right? The Gutenberg, like, again, history isn't arbitrary. For those with eyes to see, I think you can make these connections. We invented the printing press. Books became much more easy to have. We got writing everywhere. Everyone could read. You no longer had to trust the authority of the magisterium of the priests. You could just trust in your own reading of the books, right? And then all of a sudden, we came to what Sigmund Freud called the narcissism of small differences, because everybody had their own interpretations of these texts, which led to disagreements, embodied disagreements that led to schism upon schism upon schism upon schism, right? But if you understand that everything is fractally toroidal like this, and that the inside is an infinite fecundity of things you don't know, then like the text is, have you studied the Bible so much to realize there's no bottom? Have you studied anything to realize there's no bottom? I realized this with theology and doctrine because I did this with the doctrine of hell. I'm also currently doing it with like Christology and talking to Sam about the Trinity and God. And again, I was talking about wills, gnomic will and natural will. Like, did Christ have two wills or did he have one? That gets into like the Chalcedonian disagreements. Like, was it human and divine wills? Did he have two separate and human divine wills? And how does that work? You know, like there's no end to these things. And I've fallen off the peak of Mount Stupid, Dunning-Kruger, hopefully, God willing, so that in such a way that when I have disagreements with people, I do not lose their humanity in the disagreement. And I realize no matter how well they're presenting their argument, I try to steel man them, starman them. That's what starmanning is to not lose someone's humanity. You realize they are in the image of God, or that they have a divine spark. They are their humanity is valuable and true and good. And so when you're talking to them, even if they're maybe someone's talking to you and disagreeing with you in a not ideal way, in a way that you don't prefer, but you still realize, like, again, you can't judge them, because if you were them, you would be doing what they're doing. So you can't judge them. You can extend grace and mercy to them while still disagreeing with them for both of your mutual edification. That's what we're doing in TLC. I think that's why I like this place. This is why this is one of the few places that I have actual intellectual conversations about people that I disagree. Like MJ said this in Sam's most recent video on Gregory of Nyssa, and he's like, "Why are you pushing back on Sam like this?" Because he was saying it to this point. He's like, if Sam is going to Trinitarian churches and participating in Trinitarian liturgies, why do you still disagree? Like, why do you push on these things and argue and like disagree about stuff? And I'm like, because I think ideas still matter, because they're potential, right? And partially because I love ideas. I'm high in openness. I don't know what I am. I'm like 94th percentile. Let's look it up. What are bets? What is my degree in openness? I don't think I'm like 98th. So no, it's not in there. What is it? I gotta find the right folder. This is fun things. I saved a screenshot of it. Charts, graphs, that's not it. Quotes, important ideas. That's not it. Practical important stuff. Nope. This is the good. This is the really, really good stream stuff right here. What did I do with it? Why do I not know what's going on? Oh, here it is. It wasn't practical important stuff. Okay, my openness to experience. I guess overall it's 98%. This is the Peterson Big Five stuff. So openness, 96. That's what my openness is. I'm very interested in ideas. Well, my intellect, I guess that's the openness to ideas, which I think they changed to aesthetics, is 94. So like I really like talking about ideas. And I'm the kind of person as an external processor and thinking and talking about ideas that I need to do this a lot before I know how to not necessarily embody it, but like I need to, I don't know, what makes someone who likes to think about ideas the way that they are? I don't know. Okay, let's get out of here. Let's go back. Sorry, let's go back to the thing. Sorry. Okay, we're getting rid of the Taurus. I don't know. Like when someone puts verses like this, I'm just like, come on, just tell me what it is. I don't like, do you make me look it up? Usually what I like to do is screenshot the verse and then put it in there afterwards for other people to see. Because I'm like, I'm just not a automatic. I don't know every verse in the Bible. Close, but not all of them. So Aaron, this is a great comment. He says posture and orientation over position. So that's Vervaeke's, right? Adverbial over adjectival, somewhat, or it's verbs versus nouns, right? This is the great war between Barfield and, I think, Michael Lady, tell me if you're wrong. You read the book. I didn't. I just heard you talk about it. Between Barfield and Lewis, right? Barfield, I think, was a very verb person. And the position, like, where are you standing? But the problem is, like, where you're standing is never a static thing. Like, we're always moving. You're always in flow. There isn't ever an absolute stasis. This is the problem with industrialization and confessionalism, is like if your confession remains static forever, it's dead. There are words that I call, again, despirited breath. There you go, Matt. That's my word. I think that's a great word. Okay. I think it's a great phrase because it very vibrantly illustrates what I'm getting at. Logos, words, right? If the word becomes despirited, it becomes dead. It's a dead word, dead rote word. If you objectify a word, it becomes a dead static object, right? This is part of, like, you're treating language like materialism. Empty, dead, despirited words have no life in them. They have no breath in them. Words need to breathe, right? They need to be icons. They're malleable. They're not arbitrary because like all things that are embodied, a word has a body, right? It has letters. It has a structure. It has boundaries. It's these letters, and it connected to these words. It has this etymology. It has a history. There's a word. There's a tradition. A body is a tradition. Words have tradition, but they're not static, dead things. If you despirit them, if you remove that tradition, both backwards and forwards, it becomes a dead object. And you can do that with language. All right, back. Friends, I don't know what MS means. And the degree of disagreement need defined in context. I propose honesty as the critical function. So you need to be honest, yeah. Otherwise, we're both bullshitting each other, and you need to keep the humanity above. Or as Peterson says, with like his alpha chimp and the beta chimps, you want to keep playing, right? If you beat all the beta chimps every time to the point where there's no point. There's no point. The alpha just wins every time. So then they'll gang up on you and kill you. If the purpose of the game is to keep playing the game and it's good faith, then that is something that needs to be above. It needs to be above in the hierarchy or underneath in the tacit dimension. It needs to be implied. This is the thing that's underneath the implied disagreement. Because if you have actual disagreement, again, you will separate. That's my point. Okay. Relational potential is a function of similarity of a current state, similarity in ideals, personal compatibility, and openness tolerance to these differences. The most important, to your point, is often the similarity of ideals, and it is not necessary on first meeting someone. And also on continued interactions with people, because that's another thing. I mean, this is related. Okay, I think if I try to go through all this, it'll be It'll go forever. All right. This is in the, go and read the rest of these. It is in the, it's on Twitter. It's in the description. And I'm going to open this up because I want to talk about it because I've already been talking for 40 minutes. But the one last point that I want to make before I open it up and bring people in is, did I just lose it? Oh, yeah. The Freud quote of like the, what is it? I saved it on my phone. The narcissism of, someone brought this up recently. Who was it that talked about the narcissism of small differences, of minor differences, right? Some loud things going on outside. Sorry about that. So, I got together with a local friend last night who, and I wanted to, Zach, love you. You're a great man. You're a good man. Keep doing what you're doing. And we were talking about Midwestuary, how Christian it was. PBK said in his video today, and this is something else. Like, let's get some. Listen, here's us a call to like Muslims out there. Any Muslims watching this? Forward this to all your Muslim friends. Timestamp this point. Come and play in the TLC. Like, here's the thing. Are Muslims, this is where you can get into some fun critical analysis. Are Muslims, is Islam a religion that's capable of having disagreements for the sake of heaven, as Khezi says, or in elevating the common humanity underneath the differences in opinion? Is that something that Muslims are capable of doing? I would hope so. I mean, I think so. But then Paul says, like, and maybe part of this is just the evolution of the TLC. Why aren't there that many? Because Paul was implying at like 26 minutes in this morning's homeroom, something about that point, because I timestamped it and sent it to some friends. For as diverse as the TLC is, and this is to my friend Zach's point, is it's mainly Christian or post-Christian or some form of derivation of Christian. Either like Tom Holland, post-Christian secularity, right? Or the urban monoculture or whatever, metagelical. It's some form of that. But then a lot of people would argue that like this ability to disagree about things is inherently like kind of a Christian thing, although it's Jewish too. I mean, Midrash, they're disagreeing about stuff constantly and arguing about it very passionately. Like watch Hezi and Jacob disagree about Zionism. Like they disagree hard. But here's the thing. If this maybe gets to the point about actual divorce, because this is all in theory, right? But like if it gets to the point, and geez, this is probably not the illustration that I want to use, but like Zionism, if it gets to the point, because like in order to be truly Zionistic, you believe in an Israeli state to some degree. If you think that there shouldn't be an Israeli state, and that disagreement in actuality, can you be friends across an actual disagreement where you adamantly disagree that there should be an Israeli state, and you think there should be an Israeli state, when it comes to the time of either supporting or enabling or creating and sustaining an Israeli state, can you have actual disagreement there? You know, or in a marriage, when a husband and wife say like, this is the way that I think we should handle finances, kids, whatever. And if there's an actual disagreement where it's irresolvable, like this is a place where we do not agree. Like we do not see this in the same way. This is what has to happen. And this reminds me of the Jordan Peterson thing of like when he said when you disagree with someone, there's three options, right? And he says there's slave, there's tyrant, or there's work it out. The slave and the tyrant has to do with like there's some degree of a loss of agency and power and I think negative codependence to some degree in order for slave tyrant dynamics to happen. Because if you just if one person just overpowers the other one in whatever way, physically, mentally, in a masculine way, in a feminine way, I would argue that that's not real agreement. That's power. That's I don't know. I'm hearing sounds in my house. So the slave, the tyrant thing doesn't work. It's not true. It's not real. It's not good. It's some form of dishealth that eventually is going to need to work its way out, because no one gets away with anything. The body keeps the score. And I mean that both in a physical body, but also subtle bodies. The body keeps the score with subtle bodies too, which is why industrial religion isn't going to work, because the body keeps the score, the industrial subtle body of whatever the thing is. It'll keep the score, and if you are out of harmony with with your environment, with the world, with everything else, you're going to be anti-fragile, and eventually you will collapse. You know, if you're not breathing in and breathing out with your environment properly, like if you become too rigid and fundamentalist and you're just like, I'm not going to breathe, you're going to die. You have to breathe, you know? And if you breathe too much, that's not, you know, you're going to hyperventilate, or you're going to become high on oxygen or something. I'm not sure. But so you have to be in a healthy dynamic. So then, as Peterson says, slave, tyrant, or work it out. Well, what is the work it out? It's that you agree implicitly, even if it's not explicit, that us being able to continue to interact and play is important. And so what's that involve? It involves some degree of, it's going to be co-suffering, because it's going to be hard. One or both are going to have to die in many ways. I die every day. I become a living sacrifice. I give up what I want. Love does not insist on its own way. And there's mutual submission in some way, in a way that you both agree upon, in order to stay together and intact. That's the only way that divorce doesn't happen. And then I would argue, I love this Dylan Moran quote. Yeah, I think that's the guy's name. He's an Irish comedian that I heard through Peter Rollins. Is war is the inability to have conflict, or to apply it to this stream, war is the inability to disagree well. You're saying like, it's people insisting on their own way to such a point that it's saying like, I have to go to war with you. Now, is there potentially a time, here I'm going to post the link, is there potentially a time to say, whatever, this is not working right now, and in some way, hopefully peaceably and on good terms, say we need to amicably separate and go our own ways for a time, because what I want to accomplish, I have deep convictions about, and I think is important. And you don't want to participate in that. So like, and because we value this, maybe not above each other, but like, this is something that I have to do. I can't let go of it for whatever reason. I can't give it up. I can't die to this. Then you have to separate, because you can't be unified in that thing that you're trying to do. And this is where boundaries come in, and walls and stuff. Like, this is probably a lot of the people who criticize TLC, that they're just like, I think the critics of TLC are trying to accomplish something that is different than I think the implied or tacit or subtle spirit in TLC is trying to accomplish, right? Because TLC is a subtle body. It has a name of some sort. It has boundaries, although they're pretty hard to classify and nebulous, right? An estuary has boundaries, although it's a little nebulous, right? But you say the estuary is here, and then at some point you go far enough this way, there is no more estuary. So like, even though there's an estuary of freshwater and saltwater, and this is something my buddy Zach said last night, like, why do you assume you're the freshwater and not the saltwater? He didn't say this, but I did. Like, but this is kind of the own hubris that we have of assuming. You need to have the humility, because like, I have my opinions and I think I'm right, obviously, because that's why I have them. But to absolutize that and to say like, of course I'm right, and the person I'm talking to must be wrong, you're implicitly trying to colonize them. And like, do you think you're freshwater? Maybe you're the saltwater. You know, who knows? Who knows what's going on with that? Matt, get in here too, by the way. And then Freud with his so I have found this to be very true with myself, and I think I heard Tim Keller talk about this too. The closer that you are to someone, the more the narcissism of small differences comes up. Like, the closer you are to somebody, the more you're going to be able to focus on super minor things. This is something that Rod Hare, my boy, I don't know if I've seen him in the comments, always is bringing up about like super intense Christian coded disagreements and conversations. Like when we're getting into these philosophical conversations of differences in Christology, and Rod is just kind of like, why? Who cares? Well, people that are very close to it care, you know? And do these things matter? Yes, I actually think they do matter when it comes for potency reasons. But I also think that this is what I mean by like canonizing the heretics. I also think it's very important to not systematize the exclusion of people who disagree with you, which is what I think confessionalism does. Because then when you exclude, and especially within a literary world, when you exclude people who disagree with you systematically, you remove them from your salience landscape. And then you no longer can talk to people who disagree with you. And you're systematically, this is why we live in siloed worlds in the modern world, is because, or the algorithm or whatever. And this is why we're in TLC, we're using the algorithm against itself, because TLC by its nature, I would argue by its nature, it elevates difference, but then keeping each other's humanity to have ongoing conversation as the most important thing. And this is to Paul's, oh, well, I didn't pin it yet because I was distracted. PDK, I'm going to pin it. And Jonathan and Joe, I can't see you. And so if you want to, I need to see video. Otherwise, okay, I see you now. I'll add you. You can turn it off if you want. But now I see you. What's up, guys? I'm going to pin it. Talk.
Hey. I just tape on my camera. My bad. Sorry.
That's all right. I just wanted to make sure we're not going to see caged penises and stuff.
Yeah, you know. Hello. I didn't see that Gavin was here when I joined.
Yeah, Gavin, you were first. If you have thoughts, my friend.
I got tricked. I thought nobody was hopping in, and I was going to come in and keep you company. One thought that came to mind was this Wikipedia page called Law of Triviality. And I'll just read a sentence here. Parkinson provides the example of a fictional committee whose job was to approve the plans for a nuclear power plant, spending the majority of its time on discussions about relatively minor but easy to grasp issues, such as what materials to use for the staff bicycle shed, while neglecting the proposed design of the plant itself, which is far more important and a far more difficult and complex task. So this is called bike shedding. But I just bring it up because it's easy to talk about. Each person comes to the conversation with things that they're comfortable talking about, and yeah, it's rare that people want to actually explore discussions about things in which we don't know anything about, especially if it's a live stream. Do I really want to open my mouth and just sound completely dumb? So
yes.
Yeah, so I'll throw that in. And then another one that has come to mind recently is like some companies, they have a policy called no smart jerks. And so there are trade-offs, and you have to think about what is the aim. And so like if your aim is to like to build Netflix, for example, you know, they might come up with a policy of no smart jerks because the cost of jerks is just, it interferes with the capacity to help provide Netflix and control everyone's minds. So I'll throw both of those out there.
I'll pick up on that HR was designed to basically turn humans into like machine parts, and so that term jerk actually comes from Henry Ford's, and I got this from Seth Godin a while back, but Henry Ford at his factories, if people were like, they would have stopwatches for every like thing they were supposed to be doing, and so people would just like their timer would go off and they'd be like, burr, and they caught, and that you were being jerked, that was jerking. So like you know, it's not yeah, that's part of that whole thing in what we've been turned into in many capacities. I also wanted to say, related to something related to disagreement and difference, one of Luke's big points around confessionalism is, you know, at least on the personal level, that my frame is that, like, I see confessions as a part of a tradition, and that they have to be honored in a sense as a part of what has made this tradition. And we find ourselves in, you know, 2025, and confessions were written, blah, 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 years, you know, it's like, yeah, there has to be like an interface and a relationship to them, not just like, if you come to that same kind of exclusionary fact that it's like confessions are, you know, evil, they have original sin, therefore you can't like touch them. Then it, like, there has to be a relationship with them in that way, so that they don't become the shadow, you don't become the shadow confession of new confession or whatever. So,
but that's, yes, I agree with you, but I would argue that in actuality, what has been the case historically with confessions and confessionalism is that in actuality, the priority has not been on the relationship to them.
Of course not. That's why we're here right now, man.
Right. And treating them as icons, because if we were treating them as icons, they wouldn't have led to constant schisms. But they did lead to constant schisms. So that's what I'm talking about. Not saying what I believe. Of course, you should say what you believe. How else? I mean, you have to.
Yeah, and so it is. But the journey, I mean, that's not going to happen overnight on a large scale, you know, necessarily. And so it's like having to figure out how to relate to them, and which is what in my conversation with the Zoomers, the Zillennials, was what how Joseph said that what Redeemed Zoomer is turning these confessions basically into icons with the way he's memeing the different religious confessions. He's actually kind of doing that digitally. Anyways,
Paul,
I like.
this
Yeah,
is
what
just
do we think of that?
true.
Paul put out
Bringing
something
up some
on
interesting
Substack.
points.
I was just going to say, Paul put something out on Substack that I read, and he was just making the point that, you know, we have disagreements on how we enter into the presence of God. It's like, so these, you know, confessions and all this is like, people might discover a way to enter into the presence of God, and then for people who did it a different way, you just basically don't even understand that someone else entered into the presence of God in some different way, and then you can end up basically disagreeing. You can in thinking and believing that other person's way is wrong. But I was going to mention that.
Yeah, which is like idolatry, basically, right? It's like it's setting something higher than it's supposed to. Does that make sense?
That's the fear that for people who want to like cast you out in schism, is they might fear that you're going to have the wrong teaching that hurts people.
Yeah.
Well, and what's so hard about that too, this is a big Rollins point, is very often the casting people out is like and I think this is very true. I know it's true of myself, is that very often you want to exclude the other because the other is telling you something about yourself that you're not being honest with yourself about. I think a lot of people cast out heretics because they're afraid they actually think a lot of the things the heretic thinks.
oh, they're afraid of their own, like literally afraid of their own shadow. That makes sense.
Yeah. Like shadow. Yes.
Because I mean, you can really only, if you want to do the power thing, because it's tyrant, you know, it's slave, tyrant, or work it out. If you don't want to have an amicable separation, like I was talking about, which I said is necessary sometimes to accomplish things in the world. Like if one person is trying to build cars and one person is trying to build airplanes, like you have to separate because you have different goals. Mm-hmm. But if the point, like in this space, is to talk about ideas and figure out what the hell we're talking about when it comes to God, philosophy, politics, whatever, and that you want to have ongoing disagreements with people with whom you disagree so that you're actually doing something rather than just like circle jerk group thinking, you have to have the other.
Yeah.
It's necessary.
I worry about this with myself sometimes. I don't want to make it all about me right now, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts because, as you know, I do have certain convictions, kind of like yourself, Luke. I think this is part of the reason I resonate with a lot of things you say is because, also we agree on a lot of things, but just like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of times I'm raving about my personal beliefs. So I worry about that with myself, and it's definitely a big problem. I don't know, it reminds me of universalism in a way where Not that all paths lead to God or something, but like all God can be found on all paths is maybe the way, the answer to that one or something. I don't know.
I like the saying for that without diving into universalism, because God knows I would love to. But someone left in a comment once on one of my videos, which I thought was good. I don't know where this originates from, but it said, "Not all paths lead to God, but God can be found on all paths."
Yeah.
Like, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that all things participate somehow in the grander plan, you know? Yeah. So forgive me if I rave too much. Maybe I'm doing it right now.
I think one of the interesting things about what Jonathan said, and then I'll shut up, and because Massey and Jess haven't said anything, but the thing about when we, and this goes really into kind of like a Keller counterfeit gods reformed thing, which is like, what do we do with our, you know, in Luther's idol making or it was, guess it's Calvin, idol making factories? Is that to me sometimes lands you into a postmodern like flattening of everything, because if you can't say that something is important, like the relationship with what we think is important versus making a whatever worship or making an idol out of something, you like, well, if I like this too much, it's an idol. If I, you know, we're and so then like, no, everything's, if I do anything, it creates this, it has this tendency to create a type of nihilism about what should I do, you know, because you have to build towards something. And when you build towards something, you have to have like an ideal, you know? And so obviously the Christian answer to that is Christ, but like what happens in between there? That's a lot of space. And so, you know, I think that that is tough related to when we have difference and we want to put something up above, I don't know, like relationship. It's like, well, is there something that should be above that? Is there, or do we, and this goes back into, well, is, you know, is the relationality, which in the corner would be something more ontological than maybe worship, you know? So I think that in this space that you would want to preserve the relationship and, you know, so I don't know, those are random weird thoughts, but I'll butt out now.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Jonathan Peugeot at in the panel discussion that Paul just posted from Midwestuary. So it was Paul, Jonathan, and I think all you guys were there. Gavin, were you at Midwestuary? You weren't,
No,
were you?
I was not.
All right, everyone else was. But when Peugeot was like, I hate rules, and everyone kind of laughed, and then Paul elbowed him and was like, "You're orthodox, bro." But he clarified and was like rules are there just for your salvation. Like that's the point of them. Otherwise, like there's nothing good in just keeping a rule in itself. And there's always this sort of like, well, it seems to be like in religion, you always have a perennial crisis of either on an individual basis or community-wide basis or larger, that everything gets boiled down to rules and systematizing, and that you can get so good at the game that then you're out of relation with reality, with God, because you're just doing all the things that you're supposed to do. And then what happens is it seems like God enjoys breaking that to get you back in relationship. And so this would be like why God has Leviathan, is to basically smash those things. And you know, there's a very, you know, John Vervaeke talks about it in this way. He says reality is so complex that, you know, whatever map you have is the map is not the territory. Whatever ideas you have will never match reality. And so, you know, this is where he talks about self-deception, whatever. But basically, conforming too much to rules and systems is self-deception, and you always need to be in relationship. And so and then Vervaeke during Midwestuary, talked about. He wants to put intimacy and information back together. That when we're talking, that it's dialogue. This is his whole dialogos thing. There's no information on its own. It's all relational between us. But that doesn't mean it's just, what's that?
And it's embodied. Sorry.
Yeah, it's embodied, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like it's obviously not relative. Like, it's just relativism. We're just in a floating world where we can just make our own meanings and our own, like, there are real relations, but they're relations, and those are important to information. And yeah.
Could I tag on to that? I was kind of thinking about something similar when you were before you started talking with that rules thing. It's like the rules are it's like for those who can't like abide in love, then you need rules, and then for those who can't follow the rules, you need like police officers to like enforce things. And then like so there's kind of this like emanation where it's like the spirit always moves as it wills and will like change the way that it's informing things. So as it relates to like creeds and stuff, we have to be open to that mystical revelatory newness is the way I would put it. But then I also think Peugeot likes to hint at this, of course, the heaven and earth symbolism, right? It's like I would say what Baxter was talking about there was more about like the inheritance, and that like how do we decide, where to how do we pay homage and respect to these various creeds and traditions? And it's something about like the inheritance, and that the body keeps the score, like Luke was saying, and that like we need to strike a balance, of course, is I think the deepest patterns, one of them at least. And like how it's tricky to discover your true inheritance, as it were. How much of it is about your localism, how much of it is your like spiritual inheritance. And like one could argue that we are all living in inherently Christian times, as it were, or something like that, perhaps. Aquarian Christianity, that's the last thing I'll say. So
Matt,
yeah.
Matt, what do you think?
Matt, let's go. He's frozen.
Perfect.
He's
And muted.
muted.
There, it's working. It's on and off. You keep tapping it.
My mic working?
Yes.
It sounds like it's just your computer mic and not your.
How about now? Is that okay?
It does sound more computer mic-ish than mic-ish,
Than
but go ahead.
Mic-ish.
Doesn't matter. It'll be worth the wait. When you get all this figured out, oh man, what you're gonna say is the only thing PBK is gonna clip from the stream, if he clips anything.
I like what Jonathan said.
Thank you.
I mean, it was good, but that's what I'm just saying. What Matt's gonna say is gonna be better.
I believe it.
Oh, and he just left.
It works for
But look who arrived.
Yeah, look who arrived. Jeez, guys, get ready for this. Narcissist. We're talking about narcissism.
Oh my gosh, who's here?
Wanted to see myself on screen, so all these
Welcome to
interviews.
the-
I was
Alan,
like,
send me your Venmo so I can pay you back for the money I stole.
yeah, I mean, I know you got to step on some necks to make it big, Seabacks. I know that you're trying to. Hey, I get the grind. I get the hustle. So
Alan was the first person Joe and I met at Midwest Fair. We pulled up to the barbecue. We were chilling in the parking lot, and it was Alan.
Dude, that's a mistake too, because then for the rest of the were you just disappointed for the rest of the weekend?
No, it was
You
great.
start at the top.
with the roller coaster.
No, it was nice. It was nice.
On the overall topic, I've been I'm working like a dog, so I literally am just not showered, nothing. My life is falling apart. But that's
how
when
you
you're
get on
closest
this-
to God, This is like, Dostoevsky used to like, when he felt closest to God, he'd then have a seizure. That I'm like 4 or 5 minutes away from that seizure.
This is not good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Luke's like the original premise. I just vibed a lot, and it's funny that people are like so like no, like yeah, I disagree with tons of friends of mine, and it's like yeah, but you've already to make that friendship, you've created another meta like
Agreement.
value that allows you to bridge the disagreement of like, well, I can't talk to this person about X. Well, you not talking about that, like you not bringing up politics with your uncle so you can be friends with him, is a meta value that transcends your disagreement on politics.
Yeah, for sure. And like that's, I mean, this is my someone Nick, I think it was told me, he's just like, I think a lot of this has to do with your like church experience and like things that have happened to you that you're upset about. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Of course it does. Because that's like what happened to me on the doctrine of hell. Because I went down the rabbit hole, the unending rabbit hole of doctrine of hell. And I was like, we profess to say that we uphold the scriptures as like the authority, and we should be Berean about it, and we shouldn't do it just isolated. We should study the scriptures and then talk about it. And so I wanted to do that. But I got to a point where people were like, no, we don't want to do that. And I was like, but we wanted to do it. So like, do we want to do it or do we not want to do it? And I got into this place where like it wasn't true. And I've said this, I think, to CBACs or something. Like I think something has really shifted, at least in most churches and in the evangelical landscape. And I don't know, I don't think we ever got to talk about this with Jordan Hall when Jess, when we were hanging out. But like with Jordan, I was saying like the church that he goes to now, the kinds of things that he talks about, like I could have never had those conversations in my church ever. It wouldn't have been okay and allowed. But apparently like it's okay now in a lot of churches. So like something has shifted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just
Meta value shift.
Well, and that everyone is in their algorithms, and like everyone's exposed to so many things, but it's like if someone brings it up now, if you brought it up 5-7 years ago, like you said, like electric wire touch, but now if you bring it up, it's like, yeah, I actually saw that, you know, I actually watched that episode, you know, like
right.
And people haven't been doing this, you know, for 7 years, but they have, you know, so I think that's part of that.
Okay,
yeah,
I want to welcome Aaron, because listen, Aaron, you've never made it to my stream, man. We've talked before. This is a good thing.
This is my first time on a live stream, period. Like never joined these things. Rarely get a chance to actually watch anything live. So
nice, brother. I'm happy.
Usually pretty busy. So
also, I just want to say with like the Jim Bros TLC tank stream, you're looking like you could hit that up with your brother as well. You're looking a little swole there, my friend.
You know what? I don't even work out, so I'm just you know, rocking a metabolism at this point.
Man, that's a real flex. Good grief.
But you know, like I can spend sometimes, you know, hours a day hammering on things. So
like old school strength,
physical engagement. Well, you know, I spent my life has gone in sort of a trajectory that's spanned a couple of poles in a sense, right? And I grew up doing mostly construction, and then I spent about 10 years doing primarily digital development products and services. And then after that, I've kind of receded back again into now, you know, restoring vehicles and antique restoration and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I have a really, I think, genuine appreciation for what it means to be embodied and to be in sort of reciprocal feedback situations in an agent arena kind of scenario with the world, right? Whether it's, you know, I work a lot with metal now, but in the past with wood, sometimes with plastics and different kinds of materials. So I guess I was just thinking maybe I'd jump in and clarify a couple of my thoughts based on, you know, my reply to your post. And I think about things a lot in terms of like spatial relationship. And I actually think information is a function of relationship, and basically everything to do with kind of like our space-time environment is functions to represent relationship, like information through relationship. So my experience has been something like that. You know, we're like a node on or say like a ship in a boat in a sea, right? And the sea is fairly undifferentiated. And we start to pick out other people on boats around us. Maybe we communicate with them. But like the thing that actually matters when we're developing relationships tends to be trajectory. This was the thing I was kind of pointing at there, right? Between like, you have position, and position matters, like where you happen to be geolocated, let's say, like that's important. But what matters over time is where you're going, and that's the orientation and posture aspect. And I think this is the thing that starts to become reflected in relationships over time. This is like actually, I think, how we form relationships with people that we call friends is, you know, you like I pointed out in that post, like between two nodes of say conscious awareness embodied in this environment, like we're transferring and kind of comparing notes and sharing information. And to the degree that we do that genuinely and honestly, we're trying to like represent where it is we are, how we see things, right? And we're all kind of like blind men on the elephant. And so, you know, you can try to presume that actually you've got a good large perspective and meta view of everything that's all encompassing, but that's going to, I mean, eventually you'll shipwreck with that kind of a perspective, because course correction is always necessary. So like, how do we begin to value information? Who do we begin to value their perspectives? And how do we then allow those perspectives to inform our perspective and generate things like course corrective feedback that we can integrate, like really integrate, changes our lives. And I think that's where the trust comes in, right? Like trust is invaluable, and it's not a thing that's actually achievable synthetically. It needs to be holistic and organic, and that's the kind of thing that develops when you perceive that your trajectory has some sort of orientation and alignment that's cohesive with the other person's. And that means you can be in radically different positions. As long as you can communicate across that range, that's maybe even optimal. But the really important thing is that you're aiming towards something that's bringing you closer together over time. Because the thing that tends to cause divorce eventually is divergence, right? It's actually that you're pointing towards different goals, which means you're going in different directions. That means that you're going to be constantly increasing tension between the two, just in order to maintain any kind of relationship. And that's just sort of to try to illustrate what I was trying to, I guess, or the picture that I got based on kind of what you're describing is like, this is kind of the dance that we're trying to perform. And it's worth really noticing like the lossy quality of language and the challenges like even illustrated in your post with having to like contextually define terms, even like friend, like and you know, what does it mean to have meaningful and substantive disagreements? And what, like, if we're all seeing a little bit of a different part of the elephant, right? That's going to generate disagreements about the overall perspective. Those actually need to be things in a high trust environment that you can integrate as like perspectival feedback from others to help you generate a more complete picture, and maybe then, you know, inform the course correction and your orientation or your overall perspective and your lenses. So yeah, that feels like enough to say, but
okay, so this is
generates
good.
a little more clarity.
So yeah, I want to see what other people have to say and see how you reply to this. So we have a person here, if you know, you know, and it says that's progressivism, a direction, not a position. And then they also said, ideally, you are both anchored to the rock. So one of the things that I was thinking is like, to use your ship metaphor and like anchoring to the rock. Well, like somewhat, I guess if you're anchored to the rock, you're not leaving the harbor, you're anchored. You're not actually sailing, you're not going anywhere, you're anchored. So that metaphor collapses down a little bit. But also, like, to your illustration of the elephant, maybe that's the common tacit assumption, is that we're both navigating the elephant.
The way I would
I mean, that's the assumption that I think is provided by the base level environment, right? It's like, you know, we're what all embodied in a biological interface, the human body. that's something like the common defining element, but you can also see how much diversity there is in the representation of what a human body can be and
Yeah,
what
totally.
that can produce in people's perspectival lens. So, I mean, I think we are trying to bridge across some radical gaps. I don't know that we actually have access to the capacity to anchor to a rock. I think we're to build upon a rock, but I don't know that we're not in a place of stasis. Like the harbor is not the experience of life. Like the storms of life are actually the experience, and sometimes it's calm, sometimes it's storm, and that's the thing that requires adaptivity constantly. This is why the posture of optimal grip, like John describes, is a thing that never looks the same. It's not propositional. You can't carry it forward and it continues to be the optimal representation.
Yeah, I was saying to my buddy last night, and then someone else, sorry, I won't talk too much, but it's almost as if like friendship is relational optimal grip. like that's what friendship is it's like it's not too hard, it's not too soft, but it works, you know. It's you are both mutually agreeing that this is beneficial, even, but it's in some way it's got to be something, unless you're like practically building something to anchor like a house, like you have to agree upon that, or else, like I was saying, you're going to build a car or an airplane. Like those are different things. But in talking about ideas and
The
pursuing,
thing that you're always going to build is a propositional structure, right? Like we can't you know, we can't escape the fact that like eventually we're defining things using language, and the words are building the boundaries, and the frame that you're inhabiting is one that's, like was mentioned earlier, like it's emerged through culture and your environment, and sometimes that's broad and sometimes it's very specific, and you know, different versions of that produce different kinds of base level cohesion and different levels of, you know, base level communication and trust. And so, you know, but we're never operating with anything like an ideal ever. Like we're not, even our digital networks process with packet loss constantly, and we build algorithms to rebuild information. You know, we're doing that when we listen to other people share their perspective, and it's never without fragmentation. So, you know, I think the thing if you build on the rock, you're building that's a directionality of intent, right? You're building, you're choosing for your foundation the most secure thing that you can in an environment where you actually can't ground anything fundamentally. Like that's what we've proven in the last couple hundred years. Like we've tried reductively to break things down to a point where we can describe them, and it's never never successful. I think it's ultimately led us to the place that, you know, probably has generated a lot of our common interest in this group. You know, it's like you go to the bottom and find out that none of the systems have all the answers. None of the frameworks solve all the things. And regardless, like you're never going to have access to enough information to falsifiably prove whatever. And so then it depends how you think you want to define a rock at that point, I think. But the thing that I think you're offered it then is, you know, Gnosticism, nihilism, or Christ. And I think Christ is the rock, and the others are sand in various forms. And so like that is a posture of faith. That's where you start to build your propositions from. But the propositions are never sufficient. Like you always have to kind of hold things in that regard, I think. And that's where the feedback from friends and trusted, you know, outside sources with other perspectives that give us kind of course corrective, you know, chip off our shoulders here and there, and like point us in a different direction or bump us in a different direction sometimes, you know, like it's imperative that we're able to listen to those things and integrate it.
I think that's one of the interesting things about the difference between kind of like our carbon embodied versus our silicon digital, what's happening. Because, you know, some of the illustrations you use, obviously Grimm talks about the flotilla of meaning, or these little flotillas, because we're in a digital ocean that doesn't have like a lot of easily accessible tell us, you know, like where we're going. And so the nature of something like this, using kind of a collective agency, like you're saying, that's building on top of stuff. But when we re-embody out of this space, like we have to land into these kind of relationships that are different. This is a different kind of relationship that we have right now. Like it is distinctly digital. And obviously then, you know, you go to a conference, there's something else that happens when you're with people. But not only that, then, you know, there's a unique relationship to this and an embodied space. But then we have to go back into relationships where people haven't had 5, 6, 7 years of this incredibly fast kind of algorithmic collective intelligence. And then we have to figure out how do we relate in those spaces. And it's difficult. It's been difficult for me, but I think that I'm seeing how we have to be able to see in those spaces. We have to really look differently when there's not all of this context. Who kind of is still kind of aimed, but the conversations are much different and how you approach them, because there's like years of context that you can't just, you know, can't be shared in that way. But we're having to figure that out right now, and it's challenging. But it is interesting, like these kind of nodal in this space. Could you find, you know, and people find it all the time in different aspects, like say Christian apologetics, or people find it around a sport or video games or whatever. But you like, I think different though is if you're trying to find that around meaning, and where that, like, that's a very deep place to be finding where's your rock at, you know, and then from there, you know, aim. And I think that was something with a conversation with friend Joseph, when he was talking about, it seems like there's something involved around a great remembrance right now. And so if like people are all kind of at different places, you find yourself, like you were saying, aiming back towards something, and y'all are remembering, but you're kind of in different places on where you're remembering that. Are you remembering that, you know, somebody that's like, you know, follows the Torah? Are you remembering that as somebody that, you know, past the Protestant Reformation? Are you remembering that as somebody pre-Protestant Reformation? And yet, are we still kind of, you know, and I'm just using those terms, you know, the Christian terms or the biblical terms. But yeah, I think that's part of what's has been happening.
So this is part of my assertion. What I would say is this is the rock. The center of this is the rock.
Okay. I missed the beginning of the stream, but this is really interesting to me.
So like good luck standing on that. But I would say, but it's also because I'm a Christian, I also think it's substantive. It's a person. It's not a nothing. It's just not an object.
I would propose that the rock, in the sense of in the fundamental frame of relationship, the rock is the Trinity.
Yeah,
that's the fundamental frame of differentiation, and it's through that fractally then, like, different layers of kind of constraints afford an environment that produces because right beyond that, then you start to get novelty. But I don't think you have novelty before you have the Trinity. Before that, you have something that's called unity, but like that's not a thing we can even describe from our point of perspective. Like, we don't know what anything is to be unified.
Yeah. I liked a lot of what you were saying. I guess it was reminding me about like concept versus percept, the way that McLuhan talks about it. Like, insofar as like we make concepts like English propositions about reality. Like, I don't know if you like the terminology of the rock reminds me of this idea of like realism, right? So that there is like an elephant, which is reality, that we're all kind of, and we have percepts, like direct participations in reality, and then we have concepts about it. And I do think part of, yeah, so I don't know, I just wanted to toss that in the mix, because I guess the Trinity would be a concept, you know, but there's a percept about something real, and I think, yeah, the Trinity gets very close, you know, so just to mix it up a bit. Yeah. Also, like, that's the thing that Luke was saying about icons and idols. It's like we could be idolatrous about the Trinity. Maybe it's a hexagram. This is one of my contentions, you know? But we can also, like, there's a place for having, you know, truth claims about, like, rocks.
Well, here's the thing that's funny, and I've said this a lot, because Sam's in the corner. I've learned the most that I know about the Trinity theologically from Sam Tiedemann and from my conversations with him, and he doesn't affirm the Trinity.
Apophatic.
And also, I would say this is where I want to really insist on. I love what the Orthodox call the patristic ordo. Is you start reasoning from the person, and then you go to like the natures, and then you go to the attributes. You don't, a lot of times Hellenism wants to do it backwards. Like you start with these abstractions. You start with a person. You start with something that's very real. So like even with the Trinity, I would say you start with like, how do I know God? Because again, God in the Taurus, in that framework, I would say God the Father is the center. The like nothingness, the singularity from which everything arises. And then Christ is the thing that is visible, but like even for us, so like you start with the person of Christ, but then I would say now, how do you know the person of Christ? Because now for us, Christ is like the mystical center. He's not here. Jesus, the Jewish person, Jesus of Nazareth, is not on the earth. So how do you know him? How does the Bible say you know him? You know him by the love of the brothers, and as Paul says, up to and including your enemies. So you know it in that you love people. Like that's how you know Jesus now.
I'm gonna have to watch the beginning of the stream again. I missed that part, but Keelan from that Formscapes channel with talks about like Goethe and phenomenological naturalism and cosmic subjectivity and such. He also talks about the Taurus and thinking about like Christ as the center or like that kind of divine I amness. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna have to send you some stuff, Loon Fits. I'm gonna have to watch the beginning of the stream.
Okay, we got to get Busatil in here too, because people said
David.
he should be on more live streams because everything he says is magic.
Oh, fun. Like, as in I'm a magician and people should throw rocks at me until I'm dead.
Oh.
Yes. Everything he says is magic, and magic is forbidden.
Hey, words are magic, man. Words are magic. We're all doing magic all the time. And if you don't know you're doing it, then you're doing sorcery. So.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to mess up the conversation, actually. That's what the thing that
Leviathan
appeared in my head. For play. Leviathan for play.
Leviathan for play.
Yes. So one of the things that has come into my mind is I don't care about the passages of scripture I agree with. So if I'm in church and they're going through a bunch of passages, I'm like, okay, I already agree with that part. I don't need to listen to that part at all. Right. So one time the example was, let your gentleness be known by everyone. And that is not what the pastor was preaching on. It was just like one part of it. And I'm like, I don't think that's actually how people know me. I think I'm pretty abrasive repeatedly. And I want people to know me by so I'm like listening for the things that I already go, what the hell was that? And so what I want to introduce to this conversation is, with such a man, do not even eat with him. Do not yoke yourself with an unbeliever. For what union can light have with darkness? And I like all the things.
Who said that? Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to interject. If there's more, I don't know. Jesus was eating with sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes, right?
Yeah.
This is why Paul doesn't deserve as much respect as Jesus.
That's what I would say.
Because Paul said this.
I respect Paul. I don't know about that much, you know.
No, David's just quoting Paul, and Paul's not as great as Jesus.
I'll take it. I'll take that as a criticism. Good. But could it
does
also be
Jesus-
true?
What
Go
is
ahead.
Jesus-
Yeah, I could see a place for like
What
maybe
is-
distinctions without a difference, or like what is it? You know, like something like Gilchrist or something. I don't know.
What does he mean by don't cast your pearls before swine and that there are wolves in sheep's clothing? I think there's discernment related to that, because that's straight up Matthew 7, but it's like and that's also where it talks about logs and eyes and planks and eyes and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's kind of the heart of the question of how we relate to people either that are different and even people that are, have intentions that are malicious or malevolent, is related to that. And that has to do with discernment, because this question of like judge, lest you be judged and all those kinds of things. It's a very, very hard thread to thread because, it's like easily just like, oh, I'm not going to judge, or, oh, I'm judging everybody. It's like, where is this discerning spirit? And also like, what does it mean to not cast your pearls before swine, and who are the swine, and why are there certain things that you shouldn't cast before them? And what does it mean that when Jesus talks about that, take the plank out of your own eye before you talk to somebody else about theirs, and then instantly goes into, oh, by the way, there are wolves in sheep's clothing and there are false prophets.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying, Christian, and I think it brings in this like deeper character, because I can imagine that there's people that Jesus wouldn't have eaten with. It wasn't the sinners and tax collectors, but I bet there were people that were like, you should come to my house. And he was like, no, thanks. Right? Like I can imagine that when you consider these other stories about Jesus.
That's true.
Pajot talked about that. It's like, he's way more complicated than people give him credit for.
Yeah.
He just,
I like,
because, yeah. Go
sorry.
No, go.
I was just gonna say, I like sometimes to talk about how like there was a bunch of times where he just like dipped out. He was like, "There's too many people here. I have to leave." Like,
yeah,
and or like like there was times where he says like, "Don't tell people certain things," or like people talk about how maybe there was a more esoteric teaching in addition to the he says, "For you, I put it in parlance, but for them, it's in parables," or something. I don't know. So like there is that discernment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of times I think about this in the terms of like, what are we focusing on, or like maybe what's the lens through which we approach it? Because for me, like a lot of my past was framed in terms of truth, usually propositionally defined and usually fairly narrowly. And the instances in which that fails to represent love are just abound, right? Because like as soon as you start to draw a bunch of lines, you're going to find the places where they don't fit, or it doesn't apply correctly, and or someone eventually has to make a judgment, right? It's like, it's unavoidable in the complexity of our environment. And so to me, I think if you approach it through say with the objective of projecting truth into the situation, then that's what creates that posture of judgment that basically, and I do think that lens is basically a frame that flips it right back around on yourself, and like you feel the same kind of judgment that you're willing to exert towards others. But like in the pursuit of love, that's not an avenue that's actually open to you. It's not even going to really present. Like truth is not propositional in that frame, because it basically supersedes the propositions. Like I think that's the idea of why the Spirit, like to participate in the Spirit is to participate in the spirit of love. It's not the spirit of truth. It's and I mean, you could touch on language here as well, because like I do think like we are building the world through language. Like the word is the thing that creates the world, and we do that through our attention. And so like the way that we're like the lens that we're using, whether it's truth or love, like that's a massive differentiator in like how those outcomes and go and what they produce.
I think love is horrible though, as well. Is like, for me, sometimes love, think Jess, I was telling you this story. I had a friend, and he was marrying the wrong person. Okay, and I know that he would agree with me at this point because years later he told me that he agreed. And I was having these conversations with him where I was like the only friend that was willing to tell him, you know, this is a terrible idea. But I start praying, and what do I pray for my friend? I pray for my friend that all of a sudden disaster hits him. Okay. And then I pause and I think about these words of Jesus that we're talking about, where it says, you know, forgive us as we forgive others. You know, the judgment which we use on others, it will be judged on us. And I start praying to God to hit me with horrible disaster if that's what I need, right? And so when we understand that what love might actually require is discipline, is these other things, it also gives us the courage to, it doesn't mean that I wanted only good for my friend. It means that I want disaster for myself in the same way I want it for other people. And Jess is making me read Amos right now. He's forcing me to. And that's a whole thing.
I mentioned it once.
Yes. In Amos, the problem that God is facing is he's sending these like plagues and dramatic things on people, and it's not working. So he sends his most brutal judgment upon them. They're going to have a famine of hearing the word of God. And that is supposed to be worse than the famine, worse than the plagues, worse than all of it is the silent treatment, right? Like that's the worst thing that could happen.
I think there's a sort of a brutal paradox in trying to participate in love, right? And I thought about this when Luke was talking, you know, way earlier, because he mentioned the disagreement someone was having about immigration, right? Mm-hmm. And without going into the dynamics and the complexities of that, if you approach it with love, I mean, at some point you have to say on what time scale, and what does love mean towards, you know, say people of the X other nation 80 years from now? And what does it mean if we deplete their best performing people over generations versus, you know, it's like there's so many dynamics. And what does it mean to uproot people who are already, without going into all of that, it's like, what does love mean in the moment, in the situation, on what time scale? Like, that's an unanswerable question. It's infinite in its application. And so, like, to me, this is the challenge of walking in the Spirit, or something like living in the Spirit, is like discovering moment by moment, like how to express that in my interactions with other people. And usually that's not on broad scales where I'm impacting tens of thousands or millions of people. It's maybe within my own family or a small group of friends or whatever, and maybe people I work with or work for. So, you know, whatever the scope and scale of that is, the thing that I never know is like what to tell people to do specifically, you know, but what I'm always trying to be sensitive towards is like, overall, what are we aiming towards? Like, what is the spirit that we're following? Like, you know, some of those kinds of questions, but like those go in so many different directions. You can't even kind of start to have non-specific broad discussions about them without going down the rabbit holes.
I feel like it'd be helpful just to clearly state, I think it's very wrong to believe that Jesus would not eat with some people. And that when he was talking about casting pearls before swine, he was talking to a large crowd. And so he says different things depending on who he's talking to. And I only say all that because if Jesus represents true love, and you believe there are some people he doesn't eat with, I think you're going to misunderstand what love is in its ideal form. So,
okay, I gotta say something.
I think I would agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
I thought you would, Aaron.
Quick.
I thought you would.
Here we go. So, Jess, you have the con. Okay. All right, I gotta go. Jess is in control. The rules.
I gotta go in like 20 minutes. So
okay. The rules are don't speak over each other, especially when there's a lot of people in here. It's hard.
Stop telling us rules. I don't want any rules, Luke.
Conversational hospitality. Listen, it's my thoughts.
I can't see you.
All right. See you guys.
If you speak over each other, then you're not invited to eat with him.
That's right.
That's right.
Take my pearls.
I can't see it.
I wonder what, you know, the difference between what Jesus can do and what I can do. I don't know. Like at different times in my life where being able to, you know, if I have intimate information and I share that with an abusive narcissist, and that abusive narcissist takes that and tries to manipulate my family, that is not loving to my family in the hierarchy of value. But hey, you know, everything's cool, love. And then there's an issue of where, like I said, like Jesus did not, he had his own, he ate with Zacchaeus. He didn't eat with everybody. Like there was only so much time that he had in the temporal space. So he had to he discerned what and who he was doing and where and when with. So
it's making me think of like that love appears differently in different ways. Like, I don't know, when I think about love, I think about kind of like the Trinity before I mentioned the hexagram thing, basically like the heaven and earth symbolism, like this consummation of heaven and earth, you know, as like the deepest love that there is, which is like in Jesus, we have between heaven and earth, like, you know, the God man, you know, and this idea that that's what we're trying to do with love, is we're trying to marry heaven and earth, like seek first the kingdom is at hand. How do we get to the place where the kingdom is at hand and we are in that reality, like we've married that, I don't know, something. Well, so and that appears differently in different ways, like in different contexts, you know, like how we can best kind of embody the logos, as it were. If the logos is like the purpose or the principle of reality, it's that kind of balance of heaven and earth. It's to marry heaven and earth, incarnate the truth and good and such, and then that is like the word of God. You know, it's not, that is, so in that, do you see what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm. And I think for myself, there's people that I cannot be in fellowship with because I love them too much. And I don't mean that in some sort of glib way. It's like there were certain people, you know, like especially for me, some ex-girlfriends, where it was just like they wanted to still be friends, and I was just like, I have enough friends, right? You want to be with that person so closely that it's just like, I don't know how to be acquaintances with you, right? Like it's almost like too much intimacy, and so understanding what the invitation actually is, I think is something as well. And I do think that's related to when Paul says, that's right, Christian, that the yoking with an unbeliever is in terms of friendship, not about romantic relationships, despite how it was used in youth group. And the idea is, I love people that I'm with so much that I will become like them. And I need to, like, I'm sure there's people that Chad can't spend time with. I know that there's people that I can't spend time with.
That's interesting you say it that way. That I resonate with that, but I was first thinking like that. It's because sometimes I would want to help them, or like want to manifest my love for them by like beating them over the head with, you know, my beliefs or whatever. Hopefully I would be more loving about it, you know, but like, for some people, it's like, you know, for people who are, you know, in, you know, really, let's say really secular, like non-spiritual, it's like, I have trouble being friends with them because I'm coming from such a different world of all this, you know, TLC jargon, etc. You know, so I think I see your point there, but it's interesting that it's coming from the other way.
Well, and I've had experiences like that too, where like someone that I care for a lot was in a relationship that was bad. They didn't want to hear it. And then they had a terrible breakup, and I didn't want, like, I couldn't talk to them because I was just like, I don't know how to talk to them with love and honesty and not being like, do you understand what's happening now? Like, do you know what I mean? Is like when you, especially if this is the ironic part, because it's things that I went through. Not because I thought that they were so unlike me, but because they were exactly like me and they went through something I went through, but they don't want to hear what helped me. And so what do I just not tell my friend what helped me in exactly, it wasn't even, I'll just be honest. It was a family member. It's someone who not only personality, but genetically I am like, all of my predispositions are the same as them. And I can't talk to you because you do not want to hear what helped, right? Like, I love you. I won't tell you. I will leave you alone, right?
Yeah, no, I've been in a bunch of situations like that and such. As it relates to, I feel like there's a lot that could be said about that, but I don't know. Also, it's interesting, back to the main point about, like, whether we can be friends with these people, or if we can, like, try and, I don't know, part of it, it's reminding me of a friendship, one of my best friends, who it's kind of a situation like that, where I'm like trying to help him because I see him struggling with things that I have already kind of gone through and such, and it's definitely kind of a thing that comes to mind is how you can't really help people unless they're open to being helped, or like you can set an example, put the truth in front of them. That's a difficult thing. And like, that is kind of, we can be a friend to the world without being like a real, like a friend, like, like hang out all the time, like you can be friendly, I don't know.
I want a Bible fan fiction.
What was that?
I want a Bible fan fiction where Jesus spends the rest of his ministry just trying to get that rich young ruler to follow him, and just like won't stop on that one guy. He just doesn't accept the breakup, and is like, no. It's just like, Jesus, I have work today, and it's just like, but please follow me. Right?
Hey, well, that's kind of leaving the flock for the one, right? Kind of.
Well, but the one wants to be. The one is just like, oh shit, I am in way over my head.
Yeah. The one knows they need a savior because the wolves are surrounding and they're injured.
So yeah, maybe like the rich young ruler was actually just part of the flock, but I don't know. There's multiple lenses through which you see. Also, I want to say I can't see anyone when when Luke played that clip. All the screens are black now. I can't see anyone. I don't know. So I'm gonna try and.
Your screen is black for us.
Okay.
We can all.
Just to let you back in if you go out and come back in.
Sure, yeah, if you go out, I'll let you back in.
Cool. I think I'll also take off though. Actually, this was a super cool day.
All right, good to see you again.
Yeah.
See you, Jonathan.
Nice to see you again.
I think y'all were making good points. Like where, to the extent that we are not Christ incarnate, we can't fellowship with everyone. But I would add that I think there's a real invitation for everyone, that Jesus is there for everyone, even the ones you can't fellowship with. That's what I'd add there.
Yeah.
It feels like this is the place to tell this story. Oh, sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, not to go too hard on Paul, but like, I think he probably has a point that's probably based on his audience, right? The recipients,
exactly.
Right? And like,
exactly.
I do think that the principle that God's not, or that God won't test us beyond our capacity is a thing that we have to lean into and trust. And it's like the fact that Christ could dine with anyone or engage anyone in any scenario, even Satan after temptation in the desert, right? Is an illustration of just like the infinite capacity he had to meet anyone where they were at. Like, it's not clear that any of us have embodied that level of that capacity. So I don't think that's the test that's set before us.
Well, isn't Paul also talking about...
It hasn't happened in my life. But I mean, to go back to the yoking thing, like yoking with an unbeliever, right? Because I think that's actually a lot more common, or say something like that, right? It's like, because if you fought, the rest of that is that because they will lead them into the ditch, right? And in the idea of like trajectory and orientation and two people on whatever trajectories they're on, if you're not orienting towards something that's drawing you together, and say you're on divergent paths, and you know, say the friend that you're yoking with is going, you know, away from virtue, like you're not going to draw them to virtue by yoking yourself to them. That's the principle. It's that actually, you know, you can't, to the same thing. It's like when you have family members or anyone who's making mistakes, whatever, and like you try to speak to them in love, it, in my experience, rarely works at all, and can have unintended negative side effects. And you don't open someone's eyes. You're not going to turn the you know, someone from the path that they're not convinced is wrong. Like, that's not actually our position. And so to shine light is one thing, right? But to yoke yourself to someone in a way that like pulls you away, and like, because that's what it will do. In order to maintain the relationship, you'll be the one who gives.
It's important that I specify that I'm pushing against Luke, not against conservative Christians.
Yeah.
Who do, and I think that's very important, because one of the people that I meet with on a regular basis is a sex offender. And I love him, and I'm trying to help him get his life together. He's not invited to everything I do. And my wife is like, he's not around when my wife is around. Okay. Like I actually mean this. Like, I am trying to help him seek God while he's still waiting for trial for, I'm not going to get into details. But like when I used to volunteer at a homeless drop-in, there was this one woman who was a support worker, and then she quit and got hooked on crack and hitchhiked out west and was living with a bunch of homeless people, and like had a relationship with some people and a whole bunch of other stuff. And like, that was part of her story. That is someone who thoroughly yoked with the people that she loved. And she loved you could say that maybe she loved a little too much, and that was a case where it's just like, was this good? Was this was this appropriate?
Jed, what say you?
Well, I was kind of, as I was listening in and chatting around here, one of the things that one of the ideas that I've been kicking around here is just how we tend to idolize our own axioms, right? And how that relates to how people are included and excluded from like our communities, right? And who we break bread with, and kind of how fundamentally hasty that is. So I think about like Christian axioms, like core ones, like Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ is coming again, right? So we can, with some confidence, historically falsify the fact that Christ died on a cross, right? I think most people, even critical scholars, would agree with that. We believe that he rose again, and I think that's a reasonable inference, right? As Christians, we believe those things. And then we have this other axiom that is actually an unproven one. He's coming again, right? And what we tend to do is we tend to, in a sense, over-determine our axioms. Yeah, the City Connect hat, man, I enjoy this one. But you know, so we tend to over-determine our own axioms to such a degree that we make our ability to have fellowship with the others, it tends to be very difficult, right? And so one of the things that as I've kind of chased down these threads of what can I actually know, like what can I actually say, like I can firmly, not only do I know this, but I can establish it in some way that corresponds to reality, history, whatever. It actually becomes vanishingly small, right? I do believe as a Christian in that fundamental mystery of Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again. But to what level can I prove that? Right. And so one of the things that I think is very interesting as we look at, like, you know, how do you have communities where people can disagree and where they can be diverse? I think a lot of that is very much the posture that you hold your ideas within, and how you assume your axioms work within your own kind of worldview. And so I just wanted to toss that out there and see if, you know, see if that gains any traction. But I think that a lot of times, like, we have a very interesting way of being very certain about things that we have no right to be certain about.
I think that one of the pieces, I just will come back to this, is that it's different. What we can do digitally is different than what we can do physically. Like in relation, like what we can do here is very different than what we can do when we go to church with people or go to synagogue with, or whatever, or don't go. Is just very, very different. And that's one of the things that, like, I mean, because we're not in a sense accountable to life with each other, you know, and I don't know if you're in San Diego or not, like, you know, I'm not accountable to you in my life, you know, and how I have to have relationships with people I'm going to see and interact with and drive past through in traffic and stuff. Like, so I think this is, and I think I believe this would be an axiom, but or at least an opinion, that it's a mistake to try to necessarily map this onto this, because I do think that they're different. So that would be, but I think that this helps. Like, I think there's a help, and I think there's a formation that is good, that allows us to have a more pluralistic something, you know, but then it doesn't flow the same way embodied.
That's
yeah, that
really
really
interesting.
Between the pluralism that you can have in abstract spaces versus the pluralism that you can have on the ground. Those don't necessarily translate very easily, at least in my own experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
this
a lot
is
of
why fundamentally embodiment's so important. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to run, guys. I got some stuff I gotta go fix. But it's been a pleasure to talk with you all, and
come on
maybe
future
I'll
live
get a chance
streams.
to jump on again sometime. But like, I'll try. I do think like this is why fundamentally embodiment becomes that base layer of sort of like, and obviously even given the diversity of bodies, that's the place we have to start. And we're constantly building from that phenomenological perspective outwards, and that's just the nature of our embedded, embodied, conscious reality. So we start there, and we collaborate to work out. Take care, guys.
We got like 5 minutes left. Why don't we go around and wrap up? I just want to say one thing. A lot of if I remember right, and maybe I'm wrong, a lot of when Paul's being harsh about these things, it's towards false teachers, people that are claiming a certain authority to teach. And it's not just random church folks that have some obscure ideas about things. And so there is like the community of believers that sort of has this, you know, everyone's sort of idiosyncratic, and everyone should love one another in that. But when this false teacher comes and starts trying to tell you to do things, like you have to, you know, there's all sorts of examples in Paul's letters of what false teachers are trying to get the communities to do. And he's like, don't have anything to do with them. They're terrible people. Don't, like, it's always in that context. It's in the context of a hierarchy rather than the body necessarily.
That's good.
There's a part in the Didache. I don't know if you guys have read the Didache. It's like how the early church should be run, and you can see some of the issues that the early church was dealing with, and they talked about that you might have a visiting preacher who comes in and says, "You know what, guys? I think we should take up an offering." If someone is visiting and they say that, you tell them to take a hike. Right? Like this kind of, when you are loving and extend that love, you can see people being taken advantage of on a regular basis, and that they oftentimes take advantage of this to the detriment of other people within the community. Right? So when Paul says something like only give to widows who are really widows, I don't think he's saying like, I don't think that he's against people receiving money, but there is a limited amount of resources. There's a limited amount of pearls that we have. And there's only so much attention that we can give certain people, right? And we have to find people that we can have the real conversations with. I'm really glad to be able to have these conversations with people here, because I can't have them with everyone. And that's it. This really is meant to be a vitamin supplement for the rest of my life where I can't get vitamin C, right? And so there's a way, and I don't want to be constantly in relationship with all of you the way that I am with other people in my real life. It probably wouldn't actually work, right? And so I thank you all for allowing me not to get scurvy. That's all I have to say.
We're just trying to avoid scurvy.
Yeah.
Gavin, you got any closing thoughts?
So the title of the stream, you can't be friends with those with whom you disagree. I was intentionally trying to disagree just to spice things up, and it was good. I liked what everyone had to say. I was thinking about my marriage, and so going into marriage after many years, my wife and I learned to disagree increasingly and with better skill. And so I think we can disagree with people who aren't our friends, and we can disagree with people who are our friends. But when we disagree with our friends, it tends to be good, right? So that's what I would throw in there. And I thought this was pretty good. So, and thank you for that last point, Jess, about the context of what Paul said. I think the context is often overlooked, but it's important. But thank you.
Sometimes we think too flatly and we don't remember that hierarchy stuff.
It's good to be reminded.
Yeah. Baxter, we'll let Jed have the last word after you.
Paul Vanderclay just said the Didache talks about, or however you say it, a lot about itinerants. And somebody who used to make a lot of my money as an itinerant minister, it's probably why I never read it, because it's probably not very popular in the evangelical itinerant ministry.
What's itinerant ministry? Like traveling?
Yeah, hey,
traveling.
We come lead worship at our event. Yeah, here's a contract. And mapped.
I like the way you said it, by the way, because it sounded very Italian to me. You said Didache. I like it. Yeah. It's just a little Italian flip. Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think that speaks a lot to the spirit of the age related to, for somebody that did that for a good portion of their living at a time, I think that there's probably a reason I didn't know about it.
All right, Jed, you got the last word.
It takes 20 minutes to listen to.
No pressure there, right? I was thinking about the title of the video. I wasn't in for the whole conversation, so there may be some elements that I miss here, but maybe you can't be friends with those you disagree, but you should be as thankful for your enemies as you are for your friends. They're as
good word.
They're as formative as your friends are, and sometimes more.
Is there, I guess to the point of this, to the title, if we're going to do the thumbnail, because mine wasn't directed, but is there a difference? I don't know. And I'm not looking for a further conversation between a foil and an enemy. Okay, the end.
No, there's no difference. That's what an enemy is.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. Thank you to Luke for starting the stream and always being a rock on which we can anchor to. All right. Have fun, guys.